The fluorescent lights of the Cook County Criminal Courthouse buzzed overhead as Michael Carson gathered his papers, avoiding the eyes of his client, who had just been sentenced to 12 years for a crime Michael knew he didn't commit. Another loss, the 23rd in a string of defeats that had hollowed him out over the past 3 years. Outside, Chicago's late autumn wind cut through his worn suit jacket as he descended the courthouse steps, ignoring reporters shouting questions about the high-profile case. "Mr. Carson, how does it feel to have another guilty client heading to prison?" shouted a particularly aggressive reporter from Channel 7. Michael kept walking, his jaw clenched so tight he could feel a headache forming at his temples. The media had already decided his client's guilt long before the trial began. The jury had merely formalized what the evening news had declared for months. By the time he reached his decade-old Volvo, rain had begun to fall, matching his mood as he slammed the door and sat in silence. His phone buzzed. It was Diana from the office. "I'm not taking any more cases," he said without greeting. "Michael, you've been saying that for weeks, but I have someone here you need to meet." Diana's voice carried the urgency he'd come to recognize during their 15 years working together at the public defender's office. "I'm done, Di. I've submitted my resignation letter. 2 more weeks and I'm out. The system's broken beyond repair, and I'm tired of being the guy who keeps showing up with duct tape trying to fix it." He watched raindrops race down his windshield, remembering how once, not so long ago, he'd believed in the system, in the power of a passionate defense. "It's Anna Johnson's case, the Riverside Park incident." Diana's voice dropped. "The eyewitness identification is falling apart, and the DA knows it, but is pushing ahead anyway. This girl is 22, Michael. No priors. Works 2 jobs to support her younger siblings since their mother died. She's facing 25 to life." Michael closed his eyes, seeing his own sister's face superimposed over this stranger's story. "The Riverside case has been all over the news for months. The public wants blood." "Since when does Michael Carson care what the public wants?" Diana challenged. "The Michael I know cares about what's right." That Michael was buried under years of disappointment, but Diana knew exactly which buttons to push. "I'll meet her. That's all I'm promising," he said, starting his car. "But this is it, Diana. Last one." At the detention center, Anna Johnson sat across from him, her hands folded on the metal table. She wasn't what he expected. The media had portrayed her as hardened, dangerous, a threat to society. But the woman before him was slight, with intelligent eyes that held no fear, just a quiet resignation that unsettled him more than tears would have. "Ms. Johnson, I'm Michael Carson. I'm considering taking your case, but I need to hear your version of events." "Why?" she asked, her voice steady. "Nobody else has bothered to listen." "Maybe that's why I'm here." Anna studied him for a long moment. "I was walking home from my late shift at the diner. I cut through Riverside Park like I always do. I heard shouting, then saw a man on the ground and someone running away. I tried to help him. He was still breathing, but by the time the police arrived, he was dead, and I was covered in his blood." She held his gaze. "They didn't even ask for my side. They saw a black woman over a dead white hedge fund manager and made their decision." Michael reviewed the case file, noting the single eyewitness, an elderly man who claimed to have seen the altercation from his apartment window nearly 100 yards away at night, without his glasses. The murder weapon had never been found, and the only physical evidence was Anna's fingerprints on the victim's jacket, which she'd explained by her attempts to help him. "The prosecution's case is circumstantial at best," Michael said, more to himself than to her. "But that doesn't matter, does it?" Anna replied. "In this city, in this climate, with my background." "What background?" "Diana said you have no record. I grew up in Englewood. My father's in prison for a robbery he swears he didn't commit. My cousin was shot by police during a traffic stop when I was 15. That's enough background for most people to fill in their own blanks." Her words carried no self-pity, just a stark understanding of reality that mirrored Michael's own cynicism. As Michael left the detention center, he found himself doing something he hadn't done in months, thinking through defense strategies, potential witnesses. experts who might owe him favors. Diana was waiting in the parking lot, leaning against her car. "Well?" she asked. "I'll need the complete discovery package by morning. And get me everything on the eyewitness, medical records, vision tests, previous statements." Michael felt a familiar fire rekindling, one he thought had been extinguished for good. "Also, I want to know who's really pushing this case. Someone's made it a priority, and I want to know why." Diana smiled for the first time in weeks. "Welcome back, counselor." As Michael drove home through Chicago's rain-slicked streets, past neighborhoods that transitioned from wealth to poverty within blocks, he couldn't shake Anna's words. The system had failed his clients before, but this case felt different. This wasn't just about a legal defense. It was about confronting a system that decided guilt based on demographics and headlines rather than evidence. His apartment was cold and sparse, with unpacked boxes lining the walls, evidence of his plans to leave the city, to leave the law behind. Michael poured himself 2 fingers of bourbon and stood at his window, watching the Chicago skyline disappear into the night fog. He'd given 15 years to a system that seemed designed to fail people like Anna Johnson. Could one last case really make a difference? Or was he just postponing the inevitable admission that justice was more ideal than reality? His phone buzzed with a text from Diana. "Prosecution star witness has cataracts and failed his driver's vision test 3 months before the incident. They buried it in the discovery. This is winnable, Michael." Perhaps, Michael thought as he opened his laptop, it was time for the system to face its own failure. And perhaps he was just the burned-out, nothing-to-lose lawyer to make it happen. The prosecution's file on Anna Johnson's case landed on Michael's desk with a substantial thud at 7:15 a.m. Diana had outdone herself, obtaining not just the standard discovery, but also internal memos she'd borrowed from a sympathetic clerk in the DA's office. "You realize this could get you disbarred," Michael said, flipping through the documents. Diana shrugged, sipping her coffee. "Add it to the list." "Page 47 is where it gets interesting." Michael turned to the page and found himself looking at an informal email between the lead prosecutor, James Whitfield, and someone from the mayor's office. The language was careful, bureaucratic, but the message was clear. The Riverside Park case needed a swift resolution to maintain public confidence in the safety of our parks and public spaces. "They're railroading her for political optics," Michael muttered, a familiar disgust rising in his throat. "Election year," Diana replied simply. "The mayor can't afford another unsolved murder in an upscale neighborhood, especially not with his tough-on-crime platform." Michael spent the next 12 hours poring over every detail of the case. The victim, Edward Harrington, was a senior investment banker with political connections stretching from City Hall to Washington. The medical examiner's report indicated he'd been stabbed with a narrow blade, possibly a switchblade. Time of death was estimated between 11:30 p.m. and midnight, precisely when Anna had been walking through the park. What troubled Michael most was how neatly everything fit. Too neatly. The eyewitness, Gerald Simmons, had given a statement that matched police assumptions with suspicious precision. The prosecutors had rushed the case to grand jury in record time. And the media coverage had been relentless, with Anna's face plastered across newspapers beneath headlines like "Riverside Park Killer Caught" and "Justice Swift for Banker's Murder." The next morning, Michael visited Anna again, this time with a legal pad full of questions. "Why were you in the park that late?" he asked without preamble. "Like I told the police, it cuts 20 minutes off my walk home. I finish at the diner at 11, and the last bus that goes near my neighborhood left at 10:30. I can't afford Ubers every night. And you've taken this route before?" "3 nights a week for the past year," Anna said. "I know it's not the safest option, but neither is walking the long way around through streets with no lighting." Michael nodded, understanding the impossible choices people with limited resources often faced. "Tell me about that night. Every detail, even things that seem unimportant." Anna closed her eyes, reconstructing the evening. It was cold. I remember because the zipper on my jacket was stuck and I couldn't close it properly. There was a light drizzle, just enough to be annoying. The park was empty, like usual at that hour. Did you see anyone else before you found Mr. Harrington? Just a jogger about 10 minutes before, a white guy in a dark tracksuit with reflective stripes. He passed me going the opposite direction. Michael's pen stopped. A jogger? At nearly midnight in the rain? Yeah, I thought it was odd too. But this is Chicago. People do weird things all the time. Did you mention this to the police? Anna's laugh was hollow. They weren't interested in what I had to say. Once they found out who the victim was, they'd already decided what happened. Michael made a note to find surveillance footage from the park entrances. What about Harrington himself? Had you ever seen him before? Never. I didn't even know who he was until I saw his picture in the news the next day. As Michael left the detention center, he called Diana. I need everything on Edward Harrington, financial records, personal history, enemies, lovers, everything. Already on it, Diana replied. And Michael, I found something else. The detective who arrested Anna, Thomas Reynolds, was Harrington's wife's cousin. He somehow didn't recuse himself from the case. The web of connections was starting to reveal itself. Michael drove to the public defender's office, where he hadn't set foot in weeks, and found it unchanged, underfunded, understaffed, but filled with idealists who hadn't yet reached his level of burnout. In his dusty office, Michael pinned everything to his corkboard. Photos, timelines, witness statements. He connected them with red string, an old habit from his early days that had earned him the nickname Conspiracy Carson. Bah! But experience had taught him that in cases like this, conspiracies sometimes weren't just theories. By evening, a clearer picture was emerging. Edward Harrington had been under federal investigation for financial irregularities. His firm was rumored to be laundering money for several Chicago crime families. And according to divorce papers filed 3 weeks before his death, his wife stood to lose millions due to a prenuptial agreement, unless he died while they were still married. Follow the money, Michael murmured to himself, an axiom from his first mentor. A knock at his door interrupted his thoughts. It was Jamal Washington, a young investigator who had worked with Michael on previous cases. Diana said you're back on the Johnson case, Jamal said, leaning against the doorframe. Thought you might need some help. I need eyes on the park. The night Harrington was killed, Anna saw a jogger in a dark tracksuit with reflective stripes. Around 11:20 p.m., in the rain. Jamal raised an eyebrow. Not exactly jogging weather. Exactly. I want to know if any security cameras caught this mysterious fitness enthusiast. On it, Jamal said, turning to leave before pausing. You know they're saying this is a losing battle, right? Word around the courthouse is that Whitfield himself is prosecuting to make a statement. Michael had crossed paths with James Whitfield many times. The prosecutor had political ambitions and a perfect conviction record he maintained by only taking cases he was certain to win. If Whitfield's involved, then there's something bigger at stake here, Michael said, and I intend to find out what it is. The next week passed in a blur of motion filings, evidence reviews, and late nights. Michael challenged the eyewitness identification, filing motions to suppress based on Simmons' documented vision problems. He requested a change of venue, arguing that the media saturation had poisoned the potential jury pool. Both motions were denied by Judge Patricia Hendricks, a former prosecutor known for her tough stance. On Friday afternoon, Michael received a call from Jamal. I found something. Meet me at the office, now. 30 minutes later, Michael was watching grainy security footage from a convenience store 3 blocks from the park. At 11:17 p.m., a figure in a dark tracksuit with reflective stripes entered the store, face obscured by a baseball cap. The person purchased a pack of cigarettes, paid in cash, and left. This doesn't prove anything, Michael said, disappointed. Keep watching, Jamal replied. At 11:52 p.m., around the time Harrington was killed, the same figure returned, this time without the jacket. There was a dark stain on their light-colored T-shirt. The person bought a new shirt from the store's small clothing section, paid in cash again, and disappeared into the bathroom. 7 minutes later, they emerged wearing the new shirt, the stained one nowhere to be seen. "We need to identify this person," Michael said, pulse quickening. "Already did." Jamal slid a DMV photo across the desk. The clerk recognized him as a regular. "Jason Keller works as private security for VIP clients. Let me guess, one of his clients was Edward Harrington." "Better," Jamal said, a grim smile forming. "He works for City Shield Security, owned by none other than Thomas Reynolds' brother-in-law, the same Detective Reynolds who arrested Anna at the scene." Michael stared at the photo, feeling the pieces click into place. "We need to speak to Keller." "That might be difficult," Jamal said. "He left the country 3 days after the murder, supposedly on vacation in the Cayman Islands." Michael leaned back, mind racing. "So we have a professional security guard who may have killed Harrington, a detective with family connections who immediately arrested a convenient scapegoat, and a prosecutor with political ambitions pushing the case forward despite the flimsy evidence. And a young black woman with no resources facing life in prison," Diana added, having entered silently during their conversation. "The perfect fall person." Michael gathered the evidence, a plan forming. "I'm going to need a subpoena for City Shield's employment records and Keller's phone records, and I want to talk to Harrington's wife." As he drove home that night, rain again pounding his windshield, Michael felt something he hadn't experienced in years. The electric energy of purpose. He'd been going through the motions for so long, fighting battles he knew were lost before they began. But this case was different. This time, he had a chance to expose not just a single injustice, but the entire corrupt machinery behind it. His phone rang, displaying an unknown number. Michael answered cautiously. "Mr. Carson." The voice was male, measured, professional. "This is a courtesy call. Drop the Johnson case. Some roads are better left untraveled." Before Michael could respond, the line went dead. He sat in his parked car, the threat hanging in the air like the lingering scent of gunpowder after a shot. They were scared, which meant he was getting close. Instead of intimidating him, the call only strengthened his resolve. Anna Johnson wasn't just another client now. She was proof of everything he'd suspected about the system for years. And Michael Carson was finally ready to fight back. The Cook County Criminal Courthouse had never felt so hostile. As Michael passed through security, he noticed the guards eyeing him with newfound suspicion. Word had gotten around that he was challenging the official narrative on the Riverside Park murder, and the system was closing ranks. In the pre-trial conference room, James Whitfield was waiting, immaculate in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Michael made in a month. "Carson," Whitfield acknowledged with a tight smile. "I heard you were leaving criminal defense. Change of heart?" "Let's cut the small talk, James," Michael replied, setting his briefcase on the table. "I'm here to discuss a plea deal for Anna Johnson." Whitfield's eyebrows rose slightly. "There is no deal to discuss. The evidence is overwhelming. Your client was found at the scene, covered in the victim's blood, with no credible explanation for her presence in the park at that hour, except that she walks that route 3 times a week after her shift ends," Michael countered. "And except that we have evidence suggesting another suspect, one with connections to Detective Reynolds, who conveniently failed to mention his relationship to the victim's family when he arrested my client." For a fraction of a second, Whitfield's composure slipped. "What evidence?" Michael slid a folder across the table. "Jason Keller, security professional employed by City Shield, spotted near the crime scene around the time of the murder, displaying suspicious behavior afterward, then immediately fleeing the country. Interesting coincidence, don't you think?" Whitfield glanced at the convenience store photos, his face revealing nothing, circumstantial at best, hardly exculpatory. Add it to the compromised eyewitness, the rushed investigation, the political pressure from the mayor's office, and the detective's conflict of interest. It's enough to raise reasonable doubt. And that's before we get to Harrington's connection to organized crime and his wife's convenient financial windfall from his death. Whitfield closed the folder. Be careful, Carson. These are serious allegations against respected public servants. They become public record once I file my motions tomorrow, Michael said, leaning forward. I'm offering you a chance to save face. Drop the charges against Anna Johnson, and I'll keep my investigation focused on finding Harrington's real killer, rather than exposing the corruption that's protected them so far. Are you threatening me? I'm giving you an opportunity to do the right thing. Whitfield stood, buttoning his jacket. Your client was found at the scene. Her fingerprints are on the victim. The eyewitness identified her. Those are facts, Carson, not conspiracies. I'll see you in court. As Whitfield left, Diana entered, reading Michael's expression. I take it that went well. He's scared, Michael said, but not enough to back down yet. We need more leverage. They spent the next 2 days preparing their motion to dismiss, meticulously documenting every procedural violation, every conflict of interest, every piece of exculpatory evidence that had been overlooked or suppressed. Michael knew Judge Hendricks would likely deny it, but the motion would create a public record of their allegations and might smoke out whoever had called with that threat. On Wednesday morning, Michael was reviewing his notes for the hearing when Jamal burst into his office, breathless. Gerald Simmons is dead. Michael felt the blood drain from his face. The eyewitness? What happened? Official report says suicide. Found in his apartment this morning with a bottle of pills. That's convenient timing, Michael said, the implication hanging heavy in the air. Their star witness, the only person who claimed to have seen Anna attack Harrington, was suddenly unavailable for cross-examination. There's more, Jamal said. I've been looking into City Shield like you asked. Turns out they don't just provide personal security, they also handle special projects for high-net-worth individuals, the kind of projects that don't leave paper trails. You're saying they're hitmen? I'm saying they operate in grey areas. And guess who's one of their biggest clients? Monarch Capital, Harrington's investment firm. The pieces were aligning with disturbing clarity. Michael grabbed his coat. I need to talk to Anna. Now. At the detention center, Anna looked worse than before. Thinner, with dark circles under her eyes. The system was already taking its toll. The eyewitness is dead, Michael said without preamble. Supposedly suicide. Anna's eyes widened. They're cleaning up loose ends. I think so too. Anna, I need to know. Did you see anything else that night? Anything you might have forgotten or thought was unimportant? She closed her eyes, concentrating. The jogger. When he passed me, he was talking on a phone or maybe a radio. One of those earpiece things, and... She hesitated. What? It sounds crazy, but I think he nodded at me, like he recognized me or was expecting me. I didn't think about it until later. Michael's instincts flared. Anna, is there any chance someone knew you'd be in the park that night? Anyone who knew your route home? She thought for a moment. A few co-workers at the diner. And... Her face paled. A customer. A regular who always came in during my shifts. He asked a lot of questions about my schedule, my route home. I thought he was just being friendly, maybe interested in me. Can you describe him? White, mid-30s. Clean cut. Always wore expensive suits, but tried to dress down with a baseball cap. He left big tips. Michael pulled out his phone and showed her Jason Keller's DMV photo. Is this him? Anna's hands began to shake. That's him. Who is he? Someone connected to Harrington and possibly his murder. Anna, I think you were set up to be at the scene. The perfect patsy. Young, black, working class, alone in the park at night. Why me? Her voice cracked. I'm nobody. That's exactly why. Nobody would question your conviction. The system could close the case neatly, and everyone involved would get what they wanted. Except Anna, who would lose her life to prison for a crime designed with her as the fall person. The cruelty and calculation of it made Michael's blood boil. Back at his office, Michael and his small team worked through the night, building their case not just for Anna's defense, but against the real conspiracy. Diana used her network to obtain Keller's phone records, which showed multiple calls to Detective Reynolds in the days before and after the murder. Jamal tracked down a waiter at an upscale restaurant who had served Keller and Harrington's wife, Victoria, in a private dining room 3 weeks before the murder. By morning, they had enough to file an expanded motion to dismiss, now including allegations of conspiracy to commit murder and obstruction of justice. Michael knew it was a long shot. Judge Hendricks had never been sympathetic to such claims, but it would force the evidence into the public record. The courthouse was unusually crowded when Michael arrived for the hearing. Word had spread about the bombshell allegations, attracting both media and curious attorneys. Michael noticed several police officers stationed throughout the building, watching him with open hostility. Judge Hendricks called the court to order, her expression even more severe than usual. "Mr. Carson, I understand you've filed quite an extraordinary motion." "Yes, Your Honor. The defense moves to dismiss all charges against Anna Johnson on the grounds of actual innocence, prosecutorial misconduct, and conspiracy to frame my client." Whitfield rose immediately. "Your Honor, these are baseless, scurrilous allegations without a shred of credible evidence. I move that Mr. Carson be sanctioned for filing a frivolous motion." "I've reviewed your filing, Mr. Carson," Judge Hendricks said, ignoring Whitfield. "While I find your theories creative, to say the least, most of your so-called evidence is circumstantial and speculative." "Your Honor, if you'll allow me to present our witnesses and evidence—" "I'm not finished," she interrupted. "However, there are sufficient procedural irregularities in the arrest and charging of Ms. Johnson to warrant further investigation. I'm ordering an evidentiary hearing for next Monday to address these specific concerns." She glared at Whitfield. "And I expect full cooperation from the state's attorney's office in producing all requested documents and witnesses." Michael couldn't believe what he was hearing. Judge Hendricks had given them an opening, small but real. As the courtroom cleared, Whitfield approached Michael, his perfect composure finally cracking. "You have no idea what you're doing, Carson. No idea who you're messing with." "I know exactly who I'm dealing with," Michael replied. "The question is, are you ready for what happens when this all comes out? Because I've got nothing to lose, James. You, on the other hand." Michael let the implication hang in the air between them. For the first time since taking Anna's case, he felt the momentum shifting. The system was powerful, but it wasn't invincible. And sometimes, just sometimes, it could be forced to confront its own failures. As he walked out of the courthouse into the bright Chicago morning, Michael noticed a black SUV idling across the street, its windows tinted, a reminder that powerful people were watching, that the fight was far from over. But for the first time in years, it was a fight Michael believed was worth having, not just for Anna Johnson, but for every person the system had failed. Sunday evening, less than 24 hours before the evidentiary hearing, Michael sat in his apartment, surrounded by case files, takeout containers, and 3 emptied coffee cups. His phone rang. Diana. "Turn on Channel 5, now!" Michael fumbled for the remote, switching on his rarely used television. A special report was in progress, the anchor's grave expression setting off immediate alarm bells. Breaking development in the Riverside Park murder case. Victoria Harrington, widow of victim Edward Harrington, was found dead in her Lakeshore Drive penthouse this afternoon. Police are calling it an apparent suicide. Mrs. Harrington left behind what sources describe as a detailed confession, claiming she orchestrated her husband's murder with the help of private security contractor Jason Keller. "We go live to—" Michael muted the broadcast, mind racing. "This is too convenient," he told Diana. "Whitfield was cornered, so they're tying everything up with a dead suspect who can't defend herself." "It gets worse," Diana replied. "I just got a call from the detention center. Someone attacked Anna during recreation period. She's in the infirmary with a concussion and 3 broken ribs." Cold fury washed over Michael. "They're trying to silence everyone connected to this case." He grabbed his keys. "I'm going to see her." "Michael, it's after visiting hours. They won't let you in." "Watch me." 40 minutes and several heated arguments later, Michael stood beside Anna's hospital bed, his public defender credentials having finally granted him access. Her face was bruised, one eye swollen shut, but she was conscious. "They're saying Harrington's wife killed herself and confessed to everything," Michael said softly. Anna's laugh was bitter, ending in a wince of pain. "Convenient. Too convenient. Anna, we need to move fast. The hearing is tomorrow, but I'm worried they're setting up a scenario where the case gets dismissed because the real killer confessed, without any examination of who else was involved." "You think they killed her? Made it look like suicide?" Michael nodded grimly. "The same way they tried to have you attacked today. Someone powerful is desperate to keep certain names out of this." "What can we do?" Anna asked, her voice small against the beeping monitors. "I have an idea, but it's risky." Michael pulled his chair closer. "We need to get your story out there, the full story, including everything we've uncovered. If it's public, they can't just sweep it under the rug." "How?" "The media already decided I'm guilty." "Not all media." Michael pulled out his phone. "I know a journalist at the Tribune who's been investigating corruption in the mayor's office. She's been looking for a story like this." By midnight, Michael had spent 2 hours with reporter Sophia Chen, laying out their evidence, connections, and theories. She took meticulous notes, asking sharp questions that sometimes revealed holes in their case. Holes Michael acknowledged freely. This wasn't about proving their theory beyond doubt. It was about raising enough questions to prevent a convenient closed-door resolution. "I'll need to verify some of this independently," Sophia said as they finished. "But I can have something ready by tomorrow morning." "That's all I'm asking," Michael replied. "Just put the questions out there before they can control the narrative." When Michael arrived at the courthouse the next morning, he found an unexpected scene. A crowd had gathered on the steps, activists, community members, and a surprising number of journalists. Sophia's article had dropped at 5 a.m., and it had already been picked up by national outlets. The headline was explosive: "Conspiracy of Convenience. Did Chicago power players frame an innocent woman for murder?" Inside, the courtroom was packed. Michael spotted several faces he recognized from City Hall, looking distinctly uncomfortable. Judge Hendricks entered, her expression thunderous. "Before we begin, I want to address the highly irregular media coverage this morning," she began. "Mr. Carson, I strongly suspect you had something to do with this." "Your Honor, my client has a constitutional right to tell her story," Michael replied, standing, "especially when powerful interests are attempting to create a false narrative about her case." Judge Hendricks's eyes narrowed, but before she could respond, the courtroom doors burst open. A man in a rumpled suit entered, followed by 2 FBI agents in dark jackets. "Your Honor, my name is Richard Donovan, Assistant U.S. Attorney for the Northern District of Illinois. The federal government is intervening in this case due to evidence of criminal conspiracy crossing state lines, witness tampering, and civil rights violations." The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Michael caught Whitfield's eye across the room. The prosecutor looked ashen. "Mr. Donovan," Judge Hendricks said once order was restored, "this is highly irregular. This court has jurisdiction over the state of Illinois versus Anna Johnson. With respect, Your Honor, new evidence has come to light overnight that implicates multiple parties in a conspiracy that extends beyond the murder of Edward Harrington." Donovan approached the bench, handing over a document. "This is a federal warrant authorizing our intervention. We're also requesting an immediate suspension of proceedings against Ms. Johnson, pending our investigation." Judge Hendricks reviewed the document, her expression shifting from irritation to concern. "Very well. This court will recess until the federal investigation is complete. Ms. Johnson will remain in custody, but I'm ordering enhanced protection measures given the recent attack on her person." "Actually, Your Honor," Donovan interjected, "we're requesting Ms. Johnson's immediate release into federal protective custody. She's a key witness in our investigation, not a suspect." Michael could hardly believe what he was hearing. After weeks of fighting an uphill battle against a system determined to railroad his client, suddenly the tide had turned completely. As the details emerged over the following days, the scale of the conspiracy proved even larger than Michael had suspected. Edward Harrington's investment firm had indeed been laundering money, not just for local crime families, but for a network of corrupt city officials, including members of the mayor's inner circle. Harrington had been skimming from these funds and was preparing to turn federal informant when he was killed. The operation to frame Anna had been orchestrated not just by Victoria Harrington and Jason Keller, but by a coalition of politicians, police officers and business leaders who couldn't afford to have their financial crimes exposed. Detective Reynolds had been on their payroll for years. Even Prosecutor Whitfield was implicated, though he quickly turned state's evidence in exchange for leniency. 2 weeks after the dramatic courtroom intervention, Michael sat across from Anna in a federal safe house in the suburbs. Her physical injuries were healing, though the psychological scars would take longer. "The U.S. Attorney's Office is offering you witness protection," Michael explained. "New identity, new location, fresh start." Anna was quiet for a long moment. "What happens to the people who did this to me, who were willing to let me spend my life in prison for something I didn't do?" "The investigation is ongoing, but several arrests have already been made. Reynolds, Keller, when they extradite him from the Caymans, several city officials. The mayor himself is under investigation. And the system that made it so easy for them. The system that saw a young black woman at a crime scene and didn't bother to ask questions." Anna's voice was steady, her gaze direct. Michael had been asking himself the same question. The case had exposed individual corruption, yes, but also the structural failures that made such corruption possible. The racial biases, the resource disparities, the presumptions of guilt that permeated every level of the justice system. "That's a bigger fight," he admitted. "One case won't fix it. But it's a start, isn't it?" Anna leaned forward. "Before all this, you were ready to quit, to walk away. What about now?" The question hit Michael like a physical force. He had taken this case as his last, a final gesture before abandoning a system he believed was beyond repair. "But now, I've been thinking about that," he said slowly. "Diana and I have been talking about setting up an innocence project, focusing specifically on cases with signs of systemic bias or official misconduct. It wouldn't be easy, and we'd lose more than we'd win, but you'd be fighting the right fight," Anna finished for him. Michael nodded, feeling a clarity he hadn't experienced in years. "What about you? What will you do?" Anna smiled, her first genuine smile since he'd met her. "I'm not disappearing into witness protection. I'm going to law school." Michael raised an eyebrow. "After everything you've seen, you still want to be part of this system?" "I want to change it," she corrected him, "and now I know it can be changed. Not easily, not quickly, but it can be done. You proved that." As Michael left the safe house that evening, Chicago's skyline glittered in the distance, beautiful from afar, complex and troubled up close. The city, like its justice system, contained both terrible corruption and remarkable resilience. For the first time in years, Michael felt a sense of purpose that transcended a single case. The system failed because people allowed it to fail, looked away from its failures, or benefited from them. But people could also force it to confront those failures, to correct them, case by case, life by life. His phone buzzed with a text from Diana. "Office space available in Bronzeville. Good location for an innocence project. When can you look?" Michael smiled as he typed his response. "Tomorrow. We've got work to do." 3 months later, on a crisp autumn morning, Michael stood before a small crowd gathered for the opening of the Chicago Justice Initiative. The modest storefront office in Bronzeville bore a simple sign and an even simpler mission statement. "Justice is a human right, not a privilege." Among the attendees were community activists, a few sympathetic prosecutors, several journalists including Sophia Chen, and former clients like Anna Johnson, now in her first semester of law school. "The system fails," Michael began his remarks, "not because it's broken beyond repair, but because we accept its failures as inevitable. We're here to challenge that acceptance, to remind everyone that behind every case number is a human being whose life matters. To insist that justice must work for everyone, or it works for no one. As he spoke, Michael noticed a young woman at the back of the crowd, listening intently. She reminded him of Anna, determined, resilient, perhaps facing her own battle against a system designed to overlook her. After the ceremony, she approached him, clutching a folder of documents. "Mr. Carson, they say you help people the system has failed." Michael exchanged a glance with Diana, who nodded almost imperceptibly. The cycle was beginning again. Another case, another fight against entrenched power and systemic failures. But this time, Michael wasn't facing it alone, and he wasn't fighting without hope. "Yes," he said, extending his hand, "that's exactly what we do."